pioneering women of the mountains, talking about two mountaineering women. The first one we're going to talk about is Fanny Bullock Workman. She is a woman who defied convention and pushed the boundaries of what's possible in the world of mountaineering. Fanny Bullock Workman, a wealthy American woman, embodied the New Woman ideal of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. She rejected the traditional roles assigned to women and pursued her passion for mountain climbing, becoming a prominent mountaineer in her own right. She was one of the first female professional mountaineers. She was a geographer, cartographer, explorer, travel writer, and mountaineer who earned medals of honor from 10 European geographical societies. She was a member of the Royal Asiatic Society, Club Alpino Italiano, Deutscher, and Alpine Francis, and a founder of the American Alpine Club. She wrote 8 books with her husband and set many women's altitude records. Fanny Workman was born on January 8, 1859, to a wealthy family in Worcester, Massachusetts. Workman's early education was from governesses, and she later attended Miss Graham's finishing school in New York City. On June 16, 1882, Workman married William Hunter Workman, who was also from a wealthy family. The couple had 2 children. Rachel was born in 1884, and Siegfried was born in 1889, but died of influenza and pneumonia in 1893. Workman began climbing with her husband and spent a lot of time in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, summiting Mount Washington several times. American climbing clubs in the White Mountains encouraged women to climb, unlike European clubs. By 1886 in New England, women sometimes outnumbered men on hiking expeditions. In 1889, Workman and her husband moved to Germany. The couple took cycling tours and authored 8 books. Workman penned most of the travel books and focused on the plight of women in those areas. Between 1888 and 1893, the couple completed bicycling tours of Italy, France, and Switzerland. During this time, Workman became one of the first women to climb Mount Blanc, the Jungfrau, and the Matterhorn. Workman decided to take a longer trip, and in 1894 they biked 2,800 miles across Spain. After this trip, they wrote sketches a wheel in modern Iberia. Starting in November 1897, the Workmans covered 14,000 miles in India. When they reached the Himalayas, they hiked over the mountain passes that were between 14,000 and 18,000 feet. After their first experience in the Himalayas, they became captivated with climbing and traveled 8 more times to the area. Since it was unexplored and unmapped at the time, the Workmans created maps, surveyed and photographed the area. In 1899, they began exploring the Bialfo Glacier in the Karakoram, but switched to the Skoro Glacier due to poor weather and dangerous crevices. They reached a peak at 18,600 feet, where Workman set an altitude record for women and named it Siegfried Horn after her son. After camping at 17,000 feet, they climbed to 19,450 feet at the peak and coined it Mount Bullock Workman. From their vantage point, they could see K2, the second highest mountain in the world. Workman is credited with possibly being the first woman recorded to have laid eyes on it. In 1902, the Workmans were the first Westerners to explore the Chogolungma Glacier. In 1903, they explored the Holumba Glacier. And Workman set another altitude record by ascending a 22,567-foot peak on Pyramid Peak, later named Spantic. In 1906, at the age of 47, Workman climbed 22,735 feet on Pinnacle Peak, setting an altitude record for women that stood until 1934, when it was surpassed by Heidi Davenport. In 1908, the Workmans traveled to the Karakoram and explored Hisbar Glacier in the Hunza Nagar region. They trekked from Gilgit to Niger over the Hisbar Pass into the Bioko Glacier to Aspo. This earned Workman another record as the first woman to travel across a Himalayan glacier of that size. In 1911 and 1912, the Workmans began to explore the Rose Glacier and the Siachen Glacier in the Baltic around Masherbrum. It was the widest and longest subpolar glacier and the least explored and accessible glacier in the world at the time. They spent 2 months at over 15,000 feet exploring and mapping the area. They summited and named the highest point Indira Col. Workman led them across the Silla Pass and through the Kabiri Glacier, previously unexplored. She wrote 2 summers in the ice walls of eastern Karakoram about the expedition. Around 1914, Fanny and William stopped traveling and began writing and lecturing. Workman was one of the first women admitted into the Royal Geographical Society. In 1917, she became ill and died in 1925 in Cannes, France. She left $125,000 to Radcliffe, Wellesley, Smith, and Bryn Mawr colleges. Wellesley College offers a $16,000 fellowship named after the Fanny Bryn Mawr Foundation. And Fanny Bullock Workman has her own fellowship named after her. Thank you for taking a walk and looking at the story of Fanny Workman. Lily Bristow. Lily Bristow is another remarkable woman who made history in the world of mountaineering. According to Chamonix All Year, she became the first woman to stand on the summit of Gripon, a notable achievement that showcased her skill and bravery as a climber. Bristow's inclusion in a rope of famous Alpine Club members marked a significant milestone for women in climbing. Mountaineering, as invented by the 19th century English gentleman, was such a weird sport that just sometimes some of the normal societal rules didn't apply. Right from the start, the upper middle class barristers and academics were climbing alongside and forming lifelong friendships with peasant farmers from the cantons of Switzerland. But of course, women were excluded from this butch and adventurous sport. The masculine mind, however, is with rare exceptions imbued with the idea that a woman is not a fit comrade to steep ice or a precipitous rock. She should be satisfied with watching through a telescope some weedy and invertebrate masher being hauled up a steep peak by a couple of burly guides, or by listening to the same masher when, on his return, he lisps out with sickening drawl the many perils he has encountered. Mary Mummery, from my climbs in the Alps and Caucasus. But not all the women were prepared to put up with it, and indeed not all the men were quite so prejudiced. Mary Mummery, Albert's wife, shared in the first ascent of Devil's Ridge on Switzerland's second highest mountain, the Chachhorn. But even more talented was her friend, Lily Bristow. Women artists were almost as disapproved of as women climbers, exhibiting at the Royal Academy in a special little enclosure and offered life drawing only of a model in a decorous state of partial drapery. She moved on to the forward-looking Herkimer Art School in Bushey, where she shared lodgings with a fellow student, a future subject called Edith Petherick, whose older sister was Mary Mummery, and so the adventurous art student becomes an adventurous mountaineer. The big challenges of the 1890s were the Chamonix Aiguilles, near vertical steeps and towers of granite spiking the sky immediately to the north of Mount Blanc. In 1892, aged 28, Lily joined Mary and Fred Mummery for the crossing of the Aiguille des Grands Charmeuse. The Ripon. The following year, 1893, she scandalized respectable climbers by sharing a mountain tent on the Nantillanes Glacier with Mummery and his friend Geoffrey Hastings before an early reascent of the Aiguille des Ripon, at the time considered the hardest climb in the Alps. 3 people in one tent, 6 foot by 4 foot, was a tight fit, Lily wrote in a lively letter to her friend. Like everything else in the Alps, a night out is in itself a great pleasure. Few places can rival the narrow ledge of rock with a precipice in front and an ice slope rising behind, where our tiny tent was pitched, and a few setting suns have disclosed more gorgeous contrasts and tenderer harmonies than that which heralded the night of August 4th, 1893. Mummery, my climbs, and the Alps and Caucasus. They were joined in the morning by 3 more gentlemen. These were Mr. Brodie, with Norman Colley, and W.C. Slingsby. UK rock climbers will be aware of Colley's ledge in the Colin and Slingsby chimney on Scafell. Lily and Mummery led off up the ice, step cutting while the rest are enjoying a second round of breakfast. Mummery's hauling Lily's very cumbersome half-plate camera and its tripod. I have often felt on the climbs that if I had a sufficient knowledge and pluck, I could have done it myself. But this climb was something totally different. It was more difficult than I could have ever imagined. A succession of problems, each one of which was a ripping good climb in itself, Lily writes. Fred Mummery is magnificent. I never had the least squirm about him, even when he was in the most hideous places, where the least slip could have been certain death. And there were very many of these situations. The Ripon is a real snorker, Lily Bristow. Meanwhile, according to Mummery itself, Miss Bristow promptly followed, scorning the proffered rope. The lady of the party, surrounded on 3 sides by nothing and blocked in the front with the camera, made ready to seize the moment when an unfortunate climber should be in his least elegant attitude and transfix him forever. She took the photo of Mummery in the so-called Mummery crack, using the massive camera, then showed the representatives of the Alpine Club, which of course did not admit women, the way in which steep rocks should be climbed. And the quote was, "The way in which steep rocks should be climbed is not ladylike." Delayed by photography and by rain on the descent, they finished by lantern light, back at the glacier at 11 p.m. and all 6 now in the 6x4 tent. The wind was that rampage that I can't imagine how the fellows managed to hold the tent down at all. The Drew. The summer of 1893 will be long remembered as extraordinary favorable one for climbing. Week after week, a clear sun was shining out of the cloudless sky, and the result was that more peaks were scaled than in any previous season since the glorious fine year of the Queen's Jubilee. The Alpine Journal. Queen Margherita of Italy was out on the mountains that year, enjoying a hut night on the Punta Gafete. Also out was one Winston Churchill, making his only mountain climb on Mount Rosa while getting an attack of mountain sickness and badly flayed face. Meanwhile, evil wizard Alistair Crowley was putting up a new route on the Naples Needle above Bois d'Oeil, and Lily is again sharing a tent with Slingsby and Mummery before an attempt on the Petit Drew. Fred let me lead. She had an idea of the route, having previously watched the descending party, which I always enjoy. It is so much more exciting. After breakfast on the col, the climbing was pretty stiff, I must say, though not so nearly as difficult as the Ripon, which is a real snorker. Fred's exploit, taking a lady up the 2 most difficult peaks here without guides in the course of 1 week, with a new and very difficult route on the Aiguille des Plombs in between, is really worthy of some applause. For the Zenithorn, Mummery and Lily Bristow were up at 1:30 a.m., but the hotel keepers hadn't been able to believe they would be attempting on the mountain, and there wasn't any breakfast for them, so they didn't get away until 2:45. This was really too late. Today the mountain is climbed from about 1,200 meters above the village, and at 7 a.m., after no more than the initial path was in the dark, Mummery decided to turn back. However, Lily begged and prayed in the most artful manner and persuaded him to go on a bit and see, with the stipulation that they turn back at 10 a.m. if they hadn't reached the kernel below the ridge, and if not by then at 2, wherever they were on the mountain. Whereupon Lily fiddled with her watches. They were indeed late at the curl, but whether or not Mummery was wise to Lily's trickery, they went on up the fabulous narrow ridge and reached the top at 1:35. They descended so fast that the rope knocked Lily's hat and goggles off her head, and she yelled, "I was completely ruined by my cherished complexion." They got back to the village at 9 p.m. The hotel people continued to disbelieve in their ascent. After all, they didn't even have a guide. "Now, madame, it's not possible. Their navigation must have been off. They climbed some grassy hill and not the real Rawthorne." On August 24th, she climbed the Italian ridge of the Matterhorn with Mummery, completing in one season 4 of the hardest alpine routes available in the 1890s. 4 years later, Albert Mummery died after attempting Nanga Parbat, one of the 8,000-meter giants of the Himalayas, but Lily had already stopped climbing after just those 2 high-achieving years on the mountains. Why did she stop? It's been suggested that Mary Mummery resented Lily's tent sharing with Fred, although there's no actual evidence of that. Lily's frank letters home suggest that her family was accepting of her strange pursuit. It may be simply that she couldn't afford to travel or wanted to devote herself to her artistic career. She exhibited at the Royal Academy in the late 1890s, and a fine art website described her as a remarkable painter of landscapes and simple scenes. Lily never married, and her later life became less and less adventurous, at least where conventional biography is concerned. Until 1925, she was looking after her aging mother in Haslemere in the Surrey Hills. In 1927, she may or may not have noticed her name being borrowed by Virginia Woolf for the independent-minded painter Lily Briscoe in the Inn to the Lighthouse. In 1928, she designed a banner for the Mothers' Union and took an active part in the affairs of the parish church. She died in 1935 at age 71. Her obituary in the local paper didn't even mention her alpine ascents. As we reflect on the lives of Fanny Bullock Workman and Lily Bristow, it's clear that their achievements have had a lasting impact on the world of mountaineering. They paved the way for future generations of women climbers, demonstrating that with determination and hard work, women can overcome obstacles and achieve greatness. Their legacy extends beyond the climbing community, inspiring women around the world to pursue their passions and challenge societal expectations. As we continue to celebrate the achievements of women in mountaineering, we're reminded of the importance of perseverance, determination, and a willingness to push beyond the boundaries of what's possible. So thank you for joining me on this look at 2 mountaineering women. Have a good day, guys.